I'm gonna start that.
Happy to
Yeah.
accommodate.
Also, if there's anything you don't want us to include in the archive, just let us know and we'll strike it.
Yeah, I don't think should be any problem.
Okay.
So what I do have, this one's not going to be as helpful to you, but I do have the original drawings that we got from the architects in the 50s.
Okay.
So that was as close to where the campus was. And we did this, I went back and pulled them out for the Metz 100. Let me see if I've got it here. Yeah, page Sutherland page. I'm certainly happy to let you have any copies you want. These are large PDFs.
Okay,
but,
awesome.
Let's see if I can pull up a couple of sheets that you get a sense of what we have.
Okay.
I don't know if I can share my screen.
Yeah, I can do the permissions to let you do that. Okay, you should be able to.
I'm just trying to figure out what sheet would be the best one. Probably one of these sheets would work, because they didn't draw the entire campus, which was frustrating to us because we wanted to see more of the existing, but it did give us enough to work from. Anyway, here we go. Let me share my screen. So Page Sutherland Page was the architects that did the work in the 50s, and they did a very modern edition. So this would be the rendition of the classical facade, which, as you can see, they didn't really render very well. And then this is the edition that they did.
Okay.
And that was the old auditorium. And I never actually was in that old building. The building had been already, at least I don't remember it. The building had already been closed, or some wings of it had been shut off because of the ceiling collapse. So they were already using more limited parts of the building. But for whatever reason, I wasn't involved in the early meetings. I think it must have been one of those where this all took place when I was in graduate school, and I was back and forth. And I think most of the early programming, I'm very aware of it, but I just don't have any memories of participating in it. And I think that was partly because I got involved where they set it up. But then after that, the project ran when I wasn't there. So you can see this is what we have as a cut mark. So this shows the link back to the older building. And then this is the new edition.
Okay.
And again, I have the whole set that the city that AISD provided. Just wish there was something. I thought there was more site information, because I know we did get something. Here we go. So this is the footprint of the old building.
Okay.
First floor plan existing, second floor plan existing. So this is Metz as they were starting to do the construction of the addition. And so that would have been the historic building with several additions from I'm trying to remember, 1914, I believe, is when it started. This building was built at the same time as the Matthews, and the two of them, as I recall, share a similar plan. So now Matthews still exists, and when we did the Metz 100, of course, we were celebrating both schools simultaneously. But we have a few photographs from that era, and I think you may have some of those in the archives. But again, I have all of these plans, but this would have been from the 50s when they were doing the addition. Page Sutherland Page doing the addition. You can see right here, this is the date.
Yeah.
So anyway, actually, the date is 47, is that right? Hold on. Make sure I got that right. There you go, 47.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
This is obviously would have been hand-drawn blueprint, but it's been digitized and turned into a PDF. So this tells you where they were and some of the things that they're demolishing in preparation for the construction. But if you go through the set, you're going to see quite a bit of it. And it was sort of through this that we were able to glean what the historic building was, because there's no record of the historic building.
Awesome. So, yeah, that'd be great if you could just email that to me and I can work that into our archive. And I'm sure Lauren, who's doing all the before sections of our exhibit, would love to include that somewhere.
Okay. And again, once you go through that, if there are additional questions, I'm happy to help out.
Oh, absolutely.
Anyway, let me defer to you all and what questions you have.
Okay, awesome.
Because once you get me started, I could go on for quite a bit of time. So.
Actually, speaking of blueprints, we have scans of some, I believe that we got from Sandy, so I assume they were yours. And I just don't know how to read blueprints, and I want to include them in the exhibit, but I would like to say something more about them than just these were the blueprints for the building. So I was wondering if I could share my screen and pull them up, and if you could point out anything to me that might be useful,
Sure.
that I could talk about, or any details. Let me pull those up.
Now, as soon as you're going to show me drawings of the actual building, I can get very specific about what some of the design intent was and how it came about. So let me give you some at least general background first.
Okay.
So we put together a joint venture team with the architect, local architect Ponciano Morales III, and Ponciano is pretty much a sole practitioner. We did not specifically know that we were going to be assigned Metz, but we knew that there was a significant work on the east side in the I think it was the 90 bond issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and be aware of the context. The district, and I'm going to get all my dates wrong, so you may have to double check this. So don't quote me on the actual dates. But the district had put together a bond package. I believe it was either 86 or 87. It was a fairly recent bond package at that point that had failed. And so you've got this growing city and all this pressure to add to the schools, and all of a sudden they had their plans completely shattered. So they repackaged a bond, and they put it in front of the voters. And if you remember, well, again, this is a broader context. In the early 80s, there was a significant economic downturn, the 84, 85. And so I think a lot of the reason it didn't pass is because people were very worried about, can we afford all this debt? So what they did is they repackaged it, and it was just a lesser bond issue. And the reason that's important is that the way that the district works is after these bonds, they would do a cattle call and have all the different firms that were interested put in their credentials. And then they would have a big meeting in a big auditorium, and they would then assign all of the different consultants, the schools. They would have told them ahead of time, sometimes not, sometimes it would be assigned there. You'd walk in and know what school you got. But I remember I did attend that, where we had been assigned the Metz school. And I think Ponciano was probably sitting next to me. And somebody in the audience, one of the other architects, raised their hand and said, okay, the difference between the 87 bond and the 90 bond that passed was about a third less total. And we didn't see that you really reduced the scope or the number of schools all that much. Can you tell me what the strategy is? And they basically turned to all the architects and said, yeah, you're going to have to figure out how to work on these campuses with less money. So they deliberately had a project in front of everybody that they knew was going to require us to change some of the standards, either that or cut corners or do something differently. As luck would have it, some of the work in getting to know the community was already underway. I know I participated in several community meetings, and this project proceeded very quickly. The decision to tear the building down came very quickly. We have done a lot of preservation work in our firm, and it pains me to say that there wasn't any way we could save that building and do something with it. The only thing that's left of it is, in fact, the big carved nameplate, which sits out in front of the school now. But one of the very indelible images that I do have is having brought up the question of, well, can't we do something with the old building? Is that not part of your heritage? And I can't remember exactly who said it. Maybe it was Grandma Camacho, but it was one of the very strong advocates in the neighborhood who just cut me off and said, that's not the heritage we want to remember. that that school represents all the years of neglect when the district turned their back on just basic, basic responsibility for our neighborhood. So all we see, basically, they're saying is a years and years and years of being set aside, and the old is, and even in that era, an old building was thought of as, we think nostalgically about historic preservation. Preservation wasn't quite as far along as it is now. So there really was this attitude, old is bad. Why do all the new schools get built and we don't get ours? And meanwhile, you don't even maintain ours. And of course, if you remember, the plaster had fallen down on one of the classrooms. That was the very famous indication, more symbolic, I think, than anything else. But as like it was Lisa Anderson's class at the time, left for lunch, and when they came back, the plaster had fallen down onto all their desks because there'd been a leak in the ceiling, and no one had bothered to maintain the building. So that's the context for some of the discussion then about what we decided to prioritize. An early conversation with one of the project managers at the district, another one I'll remember, is they said, this is an East Side school. I'm not sure why they made us do a replacement school, because we're tearing down a building we could, generally repair. But, that's what they wanted for politics. And so, the only way to have a school on the East Side is to have no windows, because they're all going to be broken. And it was interesting, the two projects that were fast tracked, and I think it was more the teams were just eager to get going, or it already started. But in that first batch of schools was ours and Campbell Elementary. And both of them were the first ones to bid. And when our bid came in successful, and Campbell's evidently did as well, then it was sort of like the rest of the consultants were kind of like, oh shit. Now we have to do our schools with lesser budgets, because those two guys figured out how to do it. So, and in our case, it was very much following the idea that, first off, we didn't listen to the staff member who said that. If you look at Campbell, by the way, Campbell is built with that model. We're here as a fortress against all those people around us. We'd already had meetings with the surrounding area. Ponciano had some good, strong relationships with some of the political people in the neighborhood. And, right away, it was, how do we make this a celebration of what's here? And so we went looking deliberately in the team. Now, I'm sort of the junior member of the team. This is my father and a couple of the other folks in the office. But I'm already at this point with my master's degree, and so I'm taking or at least working on it. I'm taking an active role in some of these conversations. And I can remember at various critical points looking for context in the neighborhood when it came to designing this brick facade. And even the way we did some of the awnings. There's a building which is now right at Robert T. Martinez and Cesar Chavez. I think it's got, it's a commercial building. It has an office or something in it, but that's the old Shorty's bar. And so we sort of had this running joke in the office, because some of the neighbors who were working with us all understood. We said, well, we're looking for context. We're looking for surrounding areas and some of the commercial buildings up and down Cesar Chavez. But when it comes to the awning, that's Shorty's bar. For a school, we have a bar awning for the school. So again, it was a modern building, but we were trying to make it work in a way that would really be celebrating that community. A couple of other quick details for you. The question of the drop-off and how that access worked. We really wanted to have a covering that ran the whole length of the north elevation. And that was where the kids lined up for the buses. And so the base bid didn't actually include, we had that as an alternate. And the one thing we did that expanded the budget was, and the neighbors, again, the community went to the district at the very end, and they got that extra funding for the awning that runs the whole north face of the building. But that was to cover the kids waiting for the buses. It still does. But even then, there was a question of, well, those kids, they're going to be out there, and who's going to supervise them? And I don't remember if we said it to the district or whether the community members said it, but it was like, Grandma Camacho actually had one of the houses across the street, and she was over there every day. And so it's like, well, if she's not there, certainly all the families across the street are going to look at those kids, and those kids are going to look back at them. And they're under their porch, and the families are on their porch. I think they're going to behave themselves. And in fact, they really, that the whole attitude of, is this an institution that is somehow stuck with this community, or is this an institution that can celebrate this community? We were able to take the lead and really turn that on its head. And I think because of the political pressure, even though there was certainly some level of resistance, it wasn't very much. It was expressed to us in those little casual conversations that I've just shared with you. But by and large, the district was, whether it was because they embraced the idea that they were doing something different for the community, or whether they just didn't want to get beat up anymore. The community really got the school that it needed. And we were just, thrilled to be able to do something. And then many people don't remember this, but it did win a local AIA design award shortly after it was dedicated. I think it was either 93 or 94. And the jury said, this is so refreshing. We just don't see schools like this anymore, because it was deliberately a blend of the traditional school, but also with, obviously modern elements as well. So I give you that whole context so that now, if I can help you answer specific questions, you'll understand where most of this came from and how we've approached the design.
Yes, actually that award is very cool. I'm glad you told us about that. But I'm looking at these blueprints.
This is an odd one, and I would say this probably doesn't help you a lot. This is a site. This is a site plan, and it shows you basically a whole. It's not even the whole building. And the reason you have all these convoluted lines on it is that this is some level of electrical circuitry, and it's probably a retrofit. This has nothing to do with what we built, but some later stage, someone came in and said, okay, well, here's how we're tracking whatever additional electrical they added.
Yeah. And I have two others that look really similar to this, actually. So I might assume that they're kind of the same, like as far as electrical.
This is just showing electrical circuits. And this was probably, if you zoom in on the stamp, this may have been a submittal. This may have been something that came from the contractor. Let's see. Yeah, submittal review. So what happens is we submit all our full set of drawings and specifications, and then in certain areas, the trades show us what they're going to do, and they document it separately in their own way. We review it and say yes or no. So that's what you're looking at. You're looking at what we call a submittal. And this came from the electrician.
Okay, awesome. And then I also had, let me see, another set of site plans. Where'd they go? Somewhere over here. I have these.
Okay, now you're looking at the full site. And this brings up some interesting other discussions. Can you just give me our old dog came up and is nuzzling me, telling me she needs to take a break and let me take her outside.
Okay, so yeah, that's fine.
Give me 2 seconds and I will be right back.
Of course.
Okay, I'm adding some notes here on the doc, making sure you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see him. He answered a lot of my questions in that.
Yeah, I think I was.
So, yeah, and I can go back and like organize it and stuff.
Okay, yeah, I didn't look through everything, so I didn't know where to put it.
No, you're totally fine. Like he answered the first one. I'm still gonna ask him about budget and like timeline. Yeah.
Okay, and then which one else? I'm sorry.
Huh?
Was it just mainly the first one that he answered?
Yeah, it was mainly the first one.
Okay.
The next one was about timeline. I don't know if he's going to be able to answer this question, if he remembers or not, but I can ask. And then your question, we're doing this one now. And then this was just like a last minute,
okay,
because I was watching the last interview and he mentioned them. So I was like, oh, we could get a copy and see if we can incorporate them, or at least like link it out in our items.
That'd be great.
Oh, and I also need to ask him what the name was of his firm.
Okay. I don't know if I caught the whole name or like the title for the award that they caught. Was it
Well,
like
we're recording it, so we can just watch it back. It'll be fine.
All right, sorry about that. Cairo is much happier now.
No, you're
Good
fine.
to
No, I have my dog lying right next to me. She was on my lap earlier and I told her she had to get off.
Yeah,
All right.
it wouldn't be a Zoom call if there weren't at least one pet.
Absolutely.
interrupting. So this brings up, first off, you're looking at the overall site.
Okay.
You're looking at the new building. All of this information would be produced by a civil engineer. A lot of the notes are very specific to what is being done on all the improvements. What this brings up is a very interesting and also another unique aspect of this. We went through a site selection process when we started this, and I was involved in that probably before, because I was still in grad school as I was working for the office. I believe this is probably one of those semesters in summer that I was participating, and then I didn't, follow up on some of the others. But I remember the early stages, because the site selection, the district had at least went through the first round of thinking if possible could find an alternate site. Now, the problem was the alternate site, there was no open site that met their criteria except on the other side of 183. So it would have been a far-flung campus. And so it was pretty much an exercise that even as we were doing it, everybody knew that the answer was we were going to tear this building down and replace it on site. The neighbors really were very insistent on that. And but at least we went through at least the first round of discussion. Well, could we find an alternate site? And the district, again, I'm quoting one of the old crusty project managers, but he was like, well, the problem is that this site's not big enough to meet our standards. And so we're saying, well, why don't we look at the adjacent block? Because if we actually work with 2 blocks and consolidate them, then we're not meeting the full standards for new construction, but we're getting pretty close. And so what you're actually looking at is a street that got closed as part of the process. And the open portion with the lower fields used to be a block with residences on it. Now, again, the neighbors, under any other circumstance, suggesting that we would tear down a whole block of houses in order to build the school, you would have assumed that they would have been up in arms. But this was something that they were pretty, they didn't have that as the image at first. But as that discussion went on, it was clear that that was something that the neighbors overall embraced. I do know that there were still several residences that the district had to buy through eminent domain. So it wasn't like it was a complete cakewalk. But generally speaking, there was an eagerness and the overall consensus around certainly the leadership in the neighborhood was that this was the best way to go. So as I came back and was participating, because I remember I spent quite a bit of time on the site, what we were able to do is not only close the street, but then also, and you'd have to zoom in to see them, but I think this indicates the mature trees. So what we were able to do is to work around this playing field in such a way that we worked with the mature pecan, mostly pecan trees, there are a few oaks. And so that, as we kind of also joked around the office, this is probably the first new school in the district where all the trees aren't just little teeny stumps, because we have the trees that were in the front yard. And then another bonus, and I think if you zoom in, you can just see it. There was a brick wall in front of, a stone wall in front of one of the houses. And we decided to keep that for the area where we had the back playing area. That's over on the school side.
Oh, okay.
If you zoom down to, you zoom in, you see that kind of hatched area that looks kind of dark.
Is it?
It says play slab. It's above the little section that says play slab.
Oh, right here?
Yes. Yeah, that area is an area of an existing front, basically it was a front wall of one of the houses, and we kept it. So that's a little sitting area now that the kids can sit there as they are under the play slab, but that actually came from one of the front yards.
And where was the street that was closed on this
The
map?
street was closed right straight across. So right in front of that, if you look at
Right
all the
here?
utility lines there, yeah,
Okay.
that's the area of the right of way that we again had to work with the city, and that was an abandoned right of way so that the district could consolidate this into one lot.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. That helps out so much.
I sometimes brag that we're one of the few architecture firms in Austin that can lay claim to closing streets. But this is not the only one we've been able to do.
Yeah. And I think the other ones, there's like a couple more that look like this. I'm not.
This is the footprint of the building, but it's
Okay.
showing, my guess is, if you zoom in a little bit, you can take a look. It probably has to do with, it's gonna be hard to say.
Yeah, that text
It's
is hard to
it's
read.
clearly site. I don't know if this is landscaping specifically.
Irrigation equipment schedule.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so this
Okay.
would have been put together by the landscape folks just on
Okay.
how to irrigate all the
Yeah.
planting.
And then I think we have one or two more.
Now, is this the extent of your set? Because you don't have the full set.
Yes, we had the electricals and then we have this. And
That's
I
it?
believe that's all like the blueprints that we have.
Oh, well, then you don't have very much at all.
No.
This doesn't help you a lot. So this is, once again, these are ancillary drawings. These are tangential to the main work.
Okay.
So I should look to see if I can give you the full set.
Mm-hmm. Then I think that was it. Or maybe one more. Not sure what this is. Tree protection plan.
Right. This is, again, you're getting the landscape. You're getting electrical and landscape plans. Those are small details.
Mm-hmm. And I remember that the last time we saw you, you mentioned something about having 3D like renderings that you did like more recently.
Well, that I was looking to see about that. The only place, and I don't have it up. Let me see if I can. The only place that might come up is we did do an update in 2007. And here we go. Let's see if I have a. No, I don't have it there. I'll have to go dig and see if I still have any of that.
Okay.
And when we did, that work was done in using our current software, which is all 3D. But I don't think it's not where I expected it. So I'll have to go back and look on the server.
That's fine. I was just curious.
And it's not the whole campus. That would just be a section. I think
Gotcha.
we redid the front entry.
All right. Okay, so that was all of the blueprint stuff that we have that I had questions about. So thank you so much for that. And if you find anything that you want to email to me, we would welcome that and be very excited about it.
Well, you're going to get a lot more probably than you need.
Well, more is better than less. And even if we don't include it in the exhibit, we can still add it as an item for our site so people can still search through and look at it, even if it's not like featured.
Good.
Okay, so my next question is a little bit more about the timeline. I've been going through a bunch of newspaper articles that have been helping me kind of write my exhibit section. And I found a lot of stuff about demolition, but not as much about like the construction timeline. So do you remember like what month like the construction of the new building started and like when it was completed?
I don't. Now you all are researchers and then you're learning some of this as part of your process. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to punt and give you another assignment, but I'm on the Historic Landmarks Commission, and sometimes some of the best research is through the building department and looking at issued building permits.
Okay.
And that is publicly available. And if you were to type in the address in the city of Austin, it'll take you a couple of steps to get there, but they have in their development department a database on all permits, including some level of historic permits as well. So that would give you the time frame, not only of when the permit was issued, but also when it was finalized.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so my next question is about the budgeting process, and I know you will not remember how much the budget was. And you talked a little bit about how it was reduced for the second bond. But I was reading something in a newspaper about how there were like two different time frames with two different budgets. That there was like a fast track like time plan that would like put students back in the school like halfway through a school year, and then there was like a longer one, and that you ended up going with the longer one. So was there a difference in budget between the two of those, or do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about generally. I don't remember it specific to Metz, but this is
Okay,
an issue that comes up very regularly.
gotcha.
And I think as it affects budget, the only thing that might have been available is that they could have done some things more fast track. They could have
Okay,
done things more aggressively and then cost a little bit more.
gotcha.
But typically, the school district, almost, at least here in Central Texas, almost to a person, the administrators much prefer to start a new school in September or August, September. And so the idea that you can somehow move kids in the middle over Christmas break, in theory, you can do that, but it's just not done.
Gotcha.
And that may not have been as well established at the time. And that I vaguely remember some discussion about that in terms of sequencing. But the default, we probably, then took a little extra time and went back to the default. Part of the reason that would have been an issue is that the kids were temporarily at the Webb middle school all during construction.
I was reading a lot about that, yeah.
And that initially, I believe, was supposed to be for 1 year, but in typical district fashion, it didn't go as fast as we would have liked. That still, I mean, ours and Campbell were the only ones that were, with basically the first two schools that were opened under that 90 bond issue.
Gotcha. And also I wanted to ask, I know you said that Campbell and Metz had similar budgets, but was that budget comparable to, money that was given to, other schools on the west side? Like, was it similar or different?
I don't have any of the numbers, but I can
Okay.
tell you from just the political climate that yes, that would have been the case.
Okay.
That they would not have said, and we're cutting 2/3, we're cutting a third out of the budget just for the East Side projects. I mean, that was across the board. And that is based still on more of a, clean site start development from scratch model, which is still probably more predominant than it ought to be. But at that time, that was really the way they understood their job, was to put as many new schools and new properties as they possibly could, because Austin was just growing so fast.
All right. And then my last question, I know Daniela has one for you as well, but just so I get it right, what was the name of your firm?
Oh, at the time, we were Clovis Heimsath Architects. That's my dad.
Okay.
But very shortly afterwards, we shifted to Heimsath Architects, and that's our name still.
Yeah. Thank you. I just want to make sure I get that right when I'm typing everything out. And I think that's the end of all the questions I had, but I know Daniela has one as well.
And only other clarification for you before I leave the relationship with Ponciano, it was a 50-50 joint venture. And what we decided we'd do is, for the most part, he became sort of part of our team. When it came to construction administration, we essentially, at his suggestion, decided that one or the other team, a firm, would be the one that would do the construction. Now, that's significant because the person that is responsible for construction is going to be, on a day-to-day basis, talking to the people on site, talking to the community, working with the district. And we felt like that was really important for us because, we were fairly new. My parents had moved the firm only a couple of years earlier from Fayette County into Austin. And so we really, our hope was to kind of get to know people and get a toehold. And so again, at Ponciano's suggestion, what he had done with another firm is he said, when we did a joint venture with that firm, we decided we would each of us write down what it cost us to do the construction administration to the joint venture, because whatever was left over would be the profit that would be split 50-50. And so whichever one of the two teams would put in the lower number would be the one that would be awarded. And we really wanted it. And so we put in a fairly low number. And Ponciano was kind of miffed because I think he thought he was going to be doing the CA. But, and then, of course, we were able to do that. So we also have a lot of information about what happened during construction. Again, I was part of that. And that whole issue of the tiles and how those got put together. That was most of that took place largely during the construction.
That's great that you bring that up. That was actually my question.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I'm like, there's some recordings from like, I think it's like Donald Wayne Boss, like the librarian, and he sort of brings it up. But I was just kind of hoping to hear a little bit more on like the birth of this like idea to have those tiles from the old school on like the new school building.
Well, I can say pretty much the idea came from my mother. My parents were Clovis Heimsath architects basically for many, many years. And she was the one who was involved, particularly when we worked with our churches, with a lot of the liturgical arts. She did a lot of work with sort of handcrafted detailing and color. And I think it was, I don't know the context, but it certainly was this whole move towards what can we do to personalize this? What can we do to make this really something that the community, obviously the pride was there. How do we express that in design? And in the back of my mind, I also put it together with that comment about the graffiti. We not only, if we don't have windows, if we have windows, they'll all get broken, but all the blank walls are going to be full of graffiti. So, how can we put extra chemicals on or do something so that this graffiti will stay off our walls? That was, in the same, if not the same conversation, the same type of conversations that we were having with some of these crusty old project managers. And pretty early on, the idea of having the kids do an art project and that art project being permanently installed. And my mother had been working with tile. So I don't know how she connected with Clayworks, which up until just recently had their studio right down the street on Cesar Chavez, or maybe it was on 7th Street, 6th or 7th Street. But Clayworks had been in the neighborhood for many, many years and continued. And so she connected with them and they put together this project with the art teacher. And while the kids were at Webb, they were given blank tiles. They were given various colors to work with the glazing, and they were then each one of them did at least 2 or 3 tiles, from what I understand, and then they were all fired. And then I think they did a little bit of culling, but for the most part, any of them that came out okay were used. And I remember this also because they even asked the design team, well, don't you all want to have your tiles added to the school? And like right away, we all thought and said, no, this is the kids. They're the ones who are going to be having their hand, really on the school from the very earliest. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm the one who coined this. That was our graffiti protection program. And frankly, it worked because there was such ownership of the school that I think it was about a good decade before anybody tagged the first section of the school. And even then, it was a far away, little out of the way place. But they didn't need to put a mark on the school to feel like they owned it. They already did. The mark in the neighborhood was permanent. And when my wife taught there, many of her kids had either parents or aunts or uncles who still knew where their tile was. And the kids would say, that's the one that my aunt did, that many years ago. So if the school is decommissioned, and if for whatever reason at some future date they decide they have to take the building down, actually for me, the one that would be the biggest tragedy is that record of that amount of personal history. There's got to be some way to preserve that. I did what I could to just take pictures of the frieze one after the other just to record them, but I still don't have all of them.
Wow. Yeah, it seems very thoughtful. I think in the video, some of the like alumni are like visiting the school and they're like pointing them out. And I'm like, wow, that's like a good 20 years after. I really appreciate the fact that they like remember and they like look it back with such like nostalgia. So I think that was such a great idea. I personally, it was amazing.
Well, and my mom was the one who just, she was determined. She coordinated with the folks over at Clayworks Studios, coordinated with the art teacher, and made sure, I think probably she was the one who decided what kind of order they were in. If you look at them, the themes are really very interesting. A lot of them are referencing some other areas of the neighborhood, trees or certain kinds of places, but many of them are symbolic. And they're kids. They're kids. You have footballs and other things that they think are important. Fortunately, we didn't have PlayStations at that point, so nobody put any PS2s up on there. That was predated all that.
That would have been so weird. Yeah. So these are like, just to get it correct, they were tiles like from the old school, or they just
no. This was a brand new tile. Every single, those blue background tiles, you can buy them commercially. And you right now, if you wanted to do a custom tile that would have a permanent glaze on it, you can get glazes that you put on it, and then they're fired, and they'll last forever. And that's what those are. So they had brand new tiles, every single one of them. We already knew where they were going to go. That was going to be on the school. And so as their assignment, working with the art teacher, every kid that was part of the school at that time was allowed to do whatever they wanted. I'm sure they had some guidance, but that a palette of tiles all showed up, and they were installed, but they all had come from the kids themselves.
Wow, I love to hear the story. Okay, do you have anything else, Katie?
I actually had one last question that I just thought of. A little bit ago, you mentioned that the block that says Metz Elementary is the only remaining part of the old building. But I remember Monica mentioning something about the bricks from the courtyard also being from the original school. Is that correct?
Yes, she's correct.
Okay.
That's right. I'd forgotten that.
Okay, yeah. I wanted to make sure. Okay. Then I think that's all of our questions.
All right. The only other thing I can tell you is that I did remember when there was a death on the site during construction. That is highly unusual. That has never happened previously in the history of the firm for any of our projects, and it's never happened since. And construction is risky. There is a general awareness that, why do you think we wear hard hats when you're on the site? Something could go wrong. I don't have the details. I don't know the specifics. We were not in any way involved in any of the follow-up. But my understanding is that a worker was walking next to an unsupported wall, and that already is an indication that there might be some, there was a precaution that may or may not have been taken, and that because it fell on him, that he was crushed. And it is horrifying, and it is truly a tragedy. I believe in no way, shape, or form does it have anything to do with the continued question about whether Metz is haunted. But you can't have something like that happen and not have people, imaginations run wild. My feeling was, since I was there many a late evening and many a weekend when my wife and I were the only ones in the school, and we never heard or saw anything that ever looked funny, but if there was ever a time when there were children's voices that somebody might have heard, or if there was any kind of laughter in the hallways, I'm sure it was happy. So everything about that school and the way it came about and what it meant to that community was so exciting and uplifting. If the ghosts are there, they're there because they're really proud of that place.
I actually did quite a bit of research on both the death of the worker and the ghost story, and I've already kind of written my sections for those in the exhibit.
It's part of Metz history. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. The ghost story's fun, but I was not going to link that in any way to the death of the construction worker. That was a totally isolated event, like you said. I think it was like a second story wall that fell over as well, which is tragic. And it was like part of the demolition team. And I think I was reading that the crew got fined for that unsupported wall or not taking extra precautions and stuff. So I included a little bit about that. But Yeah, I have a
Like I
little
say,
section that memorializes that man a little bit.
You probably know more about it than I do. All I remember is that when it happened, we got the message at the office, and it was just one of those, shocking realizations that, when we say there are risks in construction, they really are. And then of course, when contractors all want to cut corners, the closest thing I ever came to, and I shut a construction site down a number of years later. This was a project in North Carolina, but a construction superintendent was letting a crane with a huge beam that was just balanced. It was only being held up in the middle, and he was letting it move over where a bunch of workers were walking. And I just said, that is the most dangerous thing I've ever seen. All it would take is just a slight move one way or the other, or a breeze, and that beam would just slide down. And so, what happens is that contractors, and thank goodness most of them really, really are able to do what they do and build well and build quality. And most of our buildings stay up pretty well. And most construction workers go home, without injuries. But there are times where there's pressure for whatever reason, either just because they're being sloppy or because they're pressured under time. And that potential for cutting corners, that's probably what we're dealing with there. But again, I don't know any of the details, just that it happened and it was very sad.
All right. Well, I guess that's everything then. So we can go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much for taking your time to come talk with us. This is super helpful. And yeah, I guess we're looking forward to when you get to see the exhibit.
I can't wait to see that. And in the meantime, you might have a lot of questions once you start looking at a full set of plans. And I'm happy to, as needed, either answer questions by email, or if you want to set something up where we could look through the sets.
Okay.
But I'll send you both the one from the old building. Again, we don't have the original building other than its reference in the 47 set. But then we do have a full set of construction drawings from my time at Metz. And if I have the 3D walkthrough, again, it would only be partial, but I'll go back and look at that. So it'll probably take a little while before I can get all that, but sometime maybe the next couple of weeks.
That's all right.
Okay. All right. Well, take it easy then. Have a great Thanksgiving. You all stay safe.
Thank you too.
Bye-bye.